Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the original custodians of these lands. The people of the rivers and the hills have walked these lands for thousands of years as well as today, and we pay respect to the elders of the past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Apologies and leaves of absence. We have Trevor Ireno as an apology, which means that we have Ian Ellett as the Acting Chief Executive Officer and Nathan Mullane as the Acting Director of Infrastructure Services tonight. Are there any other apologies or leaves of absence? No. Item 4 is declarations of conflict of interest. So we have a number of conflicts of interest with the agenda tonight, with 11.1, the August finance report. I have a material conflict of interest with this item. 12.2, the Events Grants Program 25-26. Councillor Dowsley, you have a material conflict of interest with that item? Yes. And Councillor Burke, similarly, you have a material conflict of interest with that item?
Yes, that's right.
And item 12.3, Community Grants 2025. I have a material conflict of interest with this item, and Councillor Harvey, you have declared a material conflict of interest with this item. We'll now move to open forum. Do we have any questions for open forum tonight? None. We'll now move to item 6, community and council achievements. Do any councillors wish to note a community or council achievement tonight? No. We'll now move to item 7, condolences. Councillor Harvey, I note that you have a condolence motion to raise.
I have a condolence motion for the late Robin Donald McLeish, who passed away on the 28th of August, 2025, at the age of 87. Trevor Iarino, Greg Pinkerton, and myself attended his funeral at Friday, the 5th of September at Corcus and Beechworth. The funeral service was very well attended, but there were a few glitches at the end, considering some of the technology wasn't all that good at the end, but I'm sure Robin would have had a good laugh at that. Robin was a keen observer and much-loved critic of Indigo Shire Council. He attended council meetings so regularly that if he didn't show up, inquiries were made checking on his health. I've confirmed that this evening. Robin thoroughly researched his arguments and would often submit papers several pages long to council. His well-thought-out questions at open forums challenged the knowledge of our officers, and I've been informed that some of his ideas were actually incorporated into council decisions. Robin was a tireless worker for the ratepayers of Indigo Shire, fighting for honesty and integrity. He wrote many letters to the editor supporting his views on how local government should be run. Now, I knew Robin both socially and through the occasional political discussions, sometimes over a cup of coffee. Now, often we agree to disagree, but that is what democracy is all about, and I quite enjoyed listening to his thoughts. Robin was an asset to this community, not only Beechworth, but Indigo Shire, and he was a tireless worker who will be sadly missed. Council meetings won't be quite so interesting without his contribution. Our condolences go to his wife, Kath, and his children, Anna, Kirsten, and Dirk, and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Horn, did you wish to add to that?
Yes, I just want to acknowledge Robin for all his involvement, both in council meetings and his letters to the editor, also various committees that he was on. He'd have to be one of our most consistent and, I say, persistent observers of goings on in Indigo Shire, and he will be missed.
Councillor Shepherd.
When I first got on council, Robin attended most meetings, and his piercing gaze, holding me to account, was quite onerous for a new councillor. I would see him and I miss him, like I can see him, he'd be under his eyebrows and he'd send me an email afterwards. And I'd send an email back and we'd have quite a good discussion about something. And we didn't always agree, but I always raised what he had mentioned at a council briefing because they were always considered opinions that needed discussing. And I always thought that was an interesting point he made. We need to discuss that. So I was really sad when I heard that he had passed away. So, and I'm going to miss him being there holding me to account under his eyebrows.
Thank you, councillors. Would anyone like to request that a letter of condolence be sent to the family? Councillor Harvey, you'd like to request that. I think that we can accommodate that. Thank you. Thank you for your words, councillors. Item 8 is confirmation of minutes from the previous meetings. The recommendation is that the following minutes be confirmed. 1, minutes of the council meetings held on the 26th of August 2025 as published on council's website, and 2, confidential minutes of the council meeting held on the 26th of August 2025 as provided to councillors under separate cover. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Burke? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9 is business arising from previous minutes. And the item that is listed there is an outcome of an agenda item which was previously considered in confidential session and now released for public information. So it's the Public Art Advisory Panel nominations. The following persons were appointed by Council as panel members for the Public Art Advisory Panel: Kirsten Coates, Kiralee Anderson, Nina Michelle Hunt, and Simone Nolan. So that was held in confidential until the appointees were notified and accepted the appointment. So that's good practice of ours to acknowledge when something comes out of confidential session. There are no... Sorry, Councillor Shepherd.
Could I just comment on what a great group of art aficionados they are? I think that's quite an amazing panel of great, well, it's women. It is just, by accident, but they all have a lot to do with the arts in their areas. So I think it's probably a bit of an overkill. I want them doing more than that, but congratulations to them, and I think it's a great asset for us.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I think we would all agree. Item 10 is petitions, and I can confirm there are none. So we'll go to item 11, planning and corporate services. Item 11.1 is the August 2025 finance report. I just note that this is the item that I have declared a conflict of interest for. This recommendation is in 2 parts. I have a conflict with the second part of that recommendation. I'll declare my conflict now. I have a material conflict with the second recommendation, as a close family member of mine regularly uses the meeting room as described in the room hire fees. So when we get to the second recommendation, I'll leave the room for that part of the discussion. The item is for decision. Recommendation 1 is that Council accepts the August 2025 finance report noting the progress against Council's budget. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Yes, I just note that the finance report has been submitted, and everything that needs to be reported has been in that report. So I'll move the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, look, there's not a lot to report. We're only 2 months into the financial year. Everything's tracking along. I guess the only comments that I would make about this report is that the capital works is probably a little bit behind where it has been in previous years. That might be mentioned again a little bit further down in the agenda when we talk about the capital monitor report. But otherwise, this is fairly standard finance report.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to make a comment? Councillor Horn.
I'd like to direct a question to Mr. Greg Pinkerton, our Director of Planning and Corporate Services. Greg, can you please explain to us why these amounts, with the cents?
Sorry, Councillor Horn, can I just suggest to you, I think that relates to the second recommendation.
Oh,
So, well, hold that question, a very good question for the next part of that item. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about this item, Councillor Horn?
No, sorry.
That's okay. Any other councillor like to speak to the item? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'll now leave the room with my conflict.
Thank you. As Deputy Mayor, I'll assume the chair while the Mayor is out of the room. So now we'll move to recommendation number 2. The recommendation is that Council 1 approves library meeting room hire fees of half day $51.85, full day $103.70, and 2 notes that room hire fees may be reduced or waived for community groups use for meetings less than 3 hours. Do I have someone to move this motion? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Do I have someone to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, these fees weren't adopted as part of the budget, and we've had requests from individuals and community groups to use those meeting rooms. So therefore, we now are at this stage putting in a proposed change room hire at $51.85 for half day and $103.70 for a full day, and that aligns to the similar meeting room at the old Rutherglen Council chamber. I note that this fee will be reduced or removed as appropriate for community groups seeking short use of the meeting room. And I do have a question for Sally Rice, Director of Community and Economic Development, just when that may be waived.
Thanks, councillor. I think the circumstances where the fees would be waived is when there's unique hardships that can be demonstrated, that the charges are prohibitive to activities that are otherwise overwhelmingly of community benefit, and alternative locations aren't available in a timeline or in the location that the community's seeking to use a meeting space.
So it's more for a hardship rather than something that may be negotiated.
Yeah, it's definitely would be out of the ordinary for a waiver to occur and for unique circumstances.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion as seconder?
Yes, thank you. I think these fees are quite reasonable considering the facilities you will get. And if you're worried about the $51.85 and the $1 and $103.70, it has something to do with the fees being adjusted by the rate cap at the moment, which is why they came out not as round numbers. But and again, if someone is indeed needs the room or there's genuine hardship, I think we can negotiate something for them. Thank you.
Would any other councillors like to speak to this? Yes, Councillor Horn.
Yes, I wonder if our Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton, can explain how we arrive at those odd numbers, please.
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor. The proposed rates are aligned to the President's Room and the downstairs meeting room at Rutherglen. So we like to keep similar rooms at the same price. And as Councillor Harvey indicated, these are fees that were set a long time ago, and they just go up by a percentage each year. You get these funny odd amounts every now and then.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to sum up? No. In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll get the mayor back into the room.
Item 11.2 is planning permit application PA 250048 for 42 Spring Street, Beechworth. The item is for decision, and the recommendation goes over 1 to 2.5 pages. I won't read the whole thing, but I will read the top line and the headings of the recommendation. The recommendation is that council grants a notice of decision to approve application PA 250048 at 42 Spring Street, Beechworth, for subdivision of the land into 2 lots and construction of 2 dwellings in the general residential zone, subject to the following conditions. And the conditions are listed under headings. The headings are endorsed plans, amended plans, changes required, compliance with endorsed plans development, endorsed plans subdivision, stormwater management, amenity conditions, neat and tidy site, dust control, construction management plan, landscaping plan, completion of landscaping, subdivision, connection to legal point of discharge, asset condition, crossings, and sediment control. Under each of those headings, there's a paragraph for those with interest. Do I have somebody to move a motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd.
This was a long one to read through, I must say, and all of the guidelines have been met. I know that we've had 3 objections, but having looked at their submissions and looked against the planning responses, there's not really any validation to those negative submissions. I think the only thing that I could see that were something that you could discuss is the fact that one room has a little bit less north-facing light coming into it than what is specified. And the other thing is, I think they're going to have to change the crossover where the cars go across. But other than that, all of the requirements are met with what is the planning department has specified.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, I'd agree with Councillor Shepherd's points there. I think when I went down to the Spring Street property, I understood what the design was trying to achieve on that block, and I think it works very well there, and yeah, I'll support it.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. I also note there are 3 objections, plus I think another email that came through late today that might have related to one of those existing objections to this application. And I always take those into full consideration. I've read every one carefully and weighed them up against both the planning scheme and the proposed conditions. I understand that when people buy into a subdivision with vacant lots, they get used to a certain level of amenity. It's natural to feel unsettled when change affects your home, and I respect that these concerns are genuine and are heartfelt. However, our role is to assess whether the proposal meets the planning requirements, and after careful consideration, I believe that this application complies with this scheme and therefore warrants approval.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Thank you. This is one that I think I also inspected it, and I think it's really important always to inspect all of the planning applications come before us, because there's, looking at a document is you get a very one-dimensional view of things. And I must admit, when I looked at the original application, I was certainly had sympathy with the objectors, particularly about a 2-story development next to single-story developments, people looking in on their backyard and that kind of thing. That feels like a very urban type of arrangement. But when I did look at it and having a little bit of knowledge about that end of Spring Street and a lot of the properties that come off Malakoff Street that overlook the gorge, a lot of them are, it's very steep, that particular area, and a lot of them are trying to take advantage of the views to the gorge, and I could then understand the design and why it's been designed the way it has, and I don't believe that it's, well, I believe it's appropriate for that particular location. And also, I would like to make the point, I do note that in the planning department's assessment of this application, they've noted that neighbourhood character is no longer considered relevant as a criteria under the state government's newly updated residential design standards. And yeah, I think that's going to be really quite challenging for a lot of our communities, because I think that's really at the heart of trying to maintain the strong village feel through a lot of our communities. So I think that's yeah, something that we're going to find an ongoing challenge. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Landels that those changes to the residential design standards are going to be a bit of an adjustment for us, with neighbourhood character being a relevant assessment criterion, and it will take us time to get used to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd, as the mover. Would you like to sum up?
Just like to say thank you to councillors for being quite sympathetic. I think that's quite. As we looked at that space, we did realise what a beautiful outlook everyone had, and we do absolutely. I think everyone spoke well on how it's really obvious. You wouldn't. It'd be difficult to have that gap being used for this proposal, but as per the discussion that has already had, that our role is not to say it's sorry about that. Our role is to use the planning framework to make a decision. So also, it's going to be a great outcome, I think, for that street, and great outcome for our community to have 2 new accommodation sites in that lovely Spring Street. It's a really beautiful outlook.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is planning permit application PA 250005, Douglas Street, Rutherglen. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council grants a planning permit subject to the attached conditions at Douglas Street, Rutherglen, for the use of the land as a market, building and works, signage, and to vary the number of car parking spaces. Do I have somebody who would like to move a motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd.
So this is a planning approval for council, really, for the Rutherglen silo site, which has had lots of community input and community planning, and we, like everybody else, have to get a planning permit. So we are looking for a planning permit for the use of the land as a market, building and work signage, and to vary the number of cars parking spaces. And we may say, isn't that a conflict of interest? But we have had at arm's length a consultant who has managed this part of the planning governance, and they are the ones that have looked at our planning our planning laws and have applied them. So it isn't something that our planning department has done. So it's come from a consultant. So yes, I think this is exciting to be moving ahead in this space, and I recommend that we approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you. I too think it's a great development for that precinct in Rutherglen, of which we've already had so many things like the silos, etc., and the bicycles. So, I think it'll be a valuable addition to Rutherglen and will be used quite often. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Horn.
I would like to thank our Manager of Planning and Statutory Services, James Turner, for the executive summary. I always find that very helpful. This is a very important step in preparing this area to be shovel-ready when funding opportunities arise. And while I concur with the expectation and excitement of the community to develop this area, traffic management and public safety issues are sure and ongoing maintenance requirements will need serious and more detailed consideration as the project proceeds.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Thank you. Yeah, this particular site and the Rutherglen Silo precinct was from memory a high priority in the Rutherglen Place plan, the development of this site. And this is, and it's certainly been identified as having great potential as to really add to existing infrastructure. As people have pointed out, there's art on the silos. There's also the start of the Murray to the Mountains Rail Trail and the Rutherglen Loops at that site. But it's also, yeah, so it's got, and I'm involved with a couple of groups in Rutherglen, Destination Rutherglen and also Arts Rutherglen, and they're really be excited about further development there. They see potential for events to be hosted there, and it's a public open space that can and very centrally located that can really add a lot more to it and probably give a real lift to that particular area. So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I would. I should have said there was a one submission negative to this from Housing Victoria, asking about noise and how that may affect the local houses, the people around it, and our planning department got back to them saying that will all be managed. Of course, any like amplified noise at any would all be permit required and managed, and it was all sent back and there was no reply, so I'm assuming that they were happy enough with the outcomes of that. So yes, thank you all for your comments, and I think it's going to be a great space once we approve these applications.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Is this one's working?
I'm just checking that's the right sound again, so that's back working. Sorry, we're just having a technical difficulty with the microphone. Okay, we'll continue. Item 11.4 is planning permit application PA 0017 for 11 Slaughterhouse Road, Rutherglen. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that
Madam Mayor,
Councillor Burke.
I'd like to move a motion. It's an alternate motion to what's been in the agenda. Pursuant to Section 841 of the Planning Environment Act 1987, if council had been given the opportunity, it would have approved planning permit application PA 250017 for the stage subdivision of land into 74 lots and the removal of native vegetation at 11 Slaughterhouse Road, Rutherglen, in accordance with the Land Survey's concept plan, dated 10th of September 2025 and subject to the conditions attached to this report, which include conditions requiring amendments to the concept plan. 2, 1, relocate the reserve, a park of 3,635 square metres, from the eastern boundary of the subdivision, replacing lots 35 and 36, which would create a park of 4,055 square metres. And 2, illustrate laneways, providing the following connections. Firstly, east-west to Slaughterhouse Road, located between lots 21 and 22, and lots 30-31. And also, north-south, another laneway, north-south to Herons Road, located between lots 10 and 11 and 38-39. And thirdly, to increased landscaping by an additional 40 trees to result in more than 2 trees per lot.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burke. You have moved that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Dowsley. Can I just confirm that all councillors do have a copy of that? And there's also a concept plan to be tabled in accordance with that motion. Councillor Burke, would you like to table that now?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great. Okay, Councillor Burke, I'll go to you as the mover. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Tonight we're being asked whether to confirm a conditional approval of the Slaughterhouse Road subdivision or refuse it and it will head to VCAT. I support conditional approval and making a clear, responsible decision tonight. Our officers, guided by the Planning Environment Act and the Indigo Planning Scheme, have assessed this proposal against every relevant control. Their advice is clear. It meets the tests. It's consistent with the development plan approved by the previous council, including access, lot design and open space. What's before us is simply the next step in that endorsed plan. If we refuse, the applicant will go to VCAT. The advice is unambiguous. We would almost certainly lose. And it would cost ratepayers a lot of money, including legal expenses and likely costs awarded to the other party. That's money better spent on roads, parks and services, not on avoidable legal battles. Approval doesn't give the developer a free hand. There are 51 strict permit conditions covering traffic, landscaping, amenity and environmental safeguards. It should also be noted that the developer has made a series of voluntary concessions that go well beyond the approved development plan and are shown in the revised concept plan that's been tabled. These additional commitments address connectivity, landscaping, amenity and design standards, and together they represent a constructive response to community and council concerns and deliver tangible benefits that enhance the overall development outcomes. These commitments reflect a constructive approach to address community and council concerns. I acknowledge residents' views and listening matters, but our decisions must rest on planning, law and evidence. Refusal here would be unjustifiable, unlikely to succeed and financially irresponsible. Good governance means applying the rules consistently, protecting public money and providing certainty. Approving this permit with strong conditions and extra community benefits does exactly that. For these reasons, I move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Last month, I moved a procedural motion to defer this item to allow for further discussions between council and the developer. Those discussions have now taken place, and I thank both the developer and our staff for engaging constructively. I've spent many hours researching, attending site visits, and listening to both the community and the developer on this item. My decision tonight has not been taken lightly and is well informed. As I said last month, I support sustainable development in Indigo Shire. I also recognise the real need for housing. Just last weekend in Wagga, I was struck by the huge number of people forced to live rough along the Murrumbidgee. But housing growth must not come at the cost of our town's unique character. Careful planning is what keeps our communities safe, connected and livable. For me, good growth means safe communities where open spaces are central, sunny and designed to bring people together. Connected communities linked by walkways and cycleways, fostering identity and inclusion. Diverse communities offering housing choice and innovation. And sustainable communities designed with respect for landform, solar access and environmental principles. This proposal does not fully meet those aspirations. I want better for Indigo and I commit to ensuring stronger processes for future developments. But this decision tonight is not simple. The development plan was approved by Council in August 2024, and I respect the democratic decision and acknowledge that, on legal advice, the current plan of subdivision is generally consistent with that decision. I also recognise that some in the Rutherglen community are dissatisfied. Through good faith negotiation, we have managed to influence some positive changes, and these have been achieved as outlined briefly by Councillor Burke, but also in attachment 11.4.3 in the agenda document. And I welcome those changes. I do understand that these changes may not satisfy some in the community. However, having carefully considered legal advice and the potential future cost to ratepayers, I've arrived at a decision that I'm comfortable with. I do agree that in addition to the already negotiated changes, had the public open space been moved to a more central location, then I would have approved this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
I fully endorse Councillor Dowsley's comments. Oh, I've lost my screen, sorry. This development is extremely significant as the first large-scale housing development in Rutherglen. And as such, it's vital that we get it right, not just for existing communities, but for future generations. It's our legacy. It wasn't that long ago that we handed out awards for sympathetic architecture. So I must say, I find it challenging under the new regulations that this appears to no longer carry such importance. The integration, the melding and oversight of the existing with new and presumably improved infrastructure and lifestyle opportunities is an onerous responsibility for which we must be held responsible. To my mind, safety is paramount, not a negotiable. So to see that a one road in and a one road out is acceptable in this estate is unconscionable. In an area at risk of, and with our recent history of both fire and flood, I feel our residents will be vulnerable despite a tick of approval. Yet here we are, 7 councillors with various degrees of understanding and experience, having to make calculated decisions about pursuing the matter through VCAT in the hope that we can achieve an acceptable outcome. This is not an enviable task, nor one that is done lightly.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Oh, this has been such a difficult decision. For the time I've really been on council, I've been wanting to have more strategic direction around our sustainable subdivisions. And I've read all the CASB webpage and I've looked at the templates and I've pushed for an ESD strategy. And I don't really want to support this because I don't see it as I would like to see something where people want to live, who already live in Rutherglen, who would say, I'm happy to move there, here. This is part of a rural environment. And by being here, I've still got access to north facing. I can still have my solar panels. I can walk easily into town. I can see that I'm in a rural setting. When Rutherglen community and other communities speak to me, they say that they don't want cookie cutter planning. And cookie cutter planning to them is, it could be anywhere in Victoria, like it could be in any town. It could be, you can't tell where you are when you're in the middle of it. So I'm really looking beyond this particular decision for some strategic discussion around how we can set in motion very quickly community and councillor expectations about what we want to see around sustainable subdivisions. So, look, I do appreciate the fact that, as the councillors have said, we've had advice, and as per the development plan, there's nowhere really we can go with this. I wasn't part of that planning decision, but as we've said, it's on the books. We have to abide by it. We can't change it. We can't change it much at all. And I do appreciate that the developer has negotiated beyond the development plan to have, as councils have raised, a footpath to connect the estate back into the town, the seating of Herons Road, the increased landscaping, the retention of existing mature tree, and just that whole thing about the open space, 5% open space. If there was more green space and open space in this large development, I think it would make for a more livable space and a more type setting. So I understand that there's the people who have been saying that they're concerned about this, that it's going to set a standard for Rutherglen that we will continue with. I think the fact that they have raised their concerns and we have heard them, and that we are going to look strategically at what we're going to do next around this, I think it's an important decision and an important move forward. So I understand their concern, but I also understand that this is going to VCAT, and we have little now to influence this decision other than what we would like to have seen.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to pick up on the point that Councillor Shepherd just made about looking beyond this particular application, even though obviously we do have to address the specifics of what's in front of us, but I guess looking beyond to a time when we have a stronger strategic planning framework to assess subdivisions against. And I was wondering whether the Director of Planning Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton, might be able to explain some of the work going on about settlement strategies.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Mayor. So the settlement strategy is currently underway. Council's been fortunate to receive some additional grant funding from the state government, which will help kick that along. We're probably about halfway through. We've done a lot of work on background documents such as bushfire risk assessments. So that's in progress. As far as the question you raise is about the sort of the look and the feel of the developments in each area. We're certainly planning to put as much as we can in the settlement strategy to help support that. We are limited somewhat by the state government rules. We can't go against a state government dictate on what we do, but certainly we're seeing the settlement strategy as an ideal place to talk about what makes each township different and unique and what we're looking for in the developments to come. So it would include things like the sustainable design, but also about what is the character of that town, and that will then guide our work on future subdivisions. In addition to that, we'll have a policy back to council before Christmas on subdivision design.
Thank you, Director. Any further comments, Councillor Nels?
Yeah, I suppose I'm curious particularly about this point about neighbourhood character, and if that's something that we're hoping to have as one of many elements in a settlement strategy for each town and community. That would seem to be contradicting the state government's newly updated residential design standards. Would that be the case? Is that likely to be one of those elements we'd like to see in a settlement strategy that we might struggle to get up?
Yeah, thank you again through you, Madam Mayor. It's a really complex area. There is new planning rules coming out almost weekly. As an overall answer, the momentum of state government is to take less local policy into consideration. Obviously, there's a big push on housing, and the state government is keen to see housing and dwellings as quickly and as far as is possible. And slowly the control and the influence of councils are being whittled away. So at this stage, we're going to put as much as we can in the settlement strategy that that doesn't breach the rules. In the end, it needs to be adopted by the Minister for Planning, so it's a state government decision. So we'll push as hard as we can for what we know and love in Indigo Shire.
Thank you, Director. I'd also like to make some comments. I think that this particular planning permit application we could just describe as frustrating on all accounts. I think it's frustrating for a new council to receive a previous decision for a development plan that might not be in alignment with the appetite that they now have, and know that the measure is to reflect this planning permit application against that development plan, and the measure is generally in accordance with when their appetite might be further than that. I think that there's frustration from the developer that we exceed the time taken to assess the planning permit application, and hence them taking us to VCAT. I think that the community is frustrated with us that perhaps our policy settings and our some of these things that Councillor Shepherd was talking about, sustainable subdivision frameworks and things, we don't have in place. We don't have a strong enough strategic planning suite of policies and guidance for planners and community alike at the moment, but I am pleased that we're doing a lot of work in that space and increasing our maturity quite quickly. I think that a good outcome in this space is what we were trying to achieve with the deferral at the last council meeting, to be able to push that phrase generally in accordance with as far as we reasonably could, in alignment with what's reasonable for the developer who has prepared plans in accordance with the development plan, but also to push that as far as the council appetite might allow, and the community to reflect what the community is after as best as possible. I think that we've done that, and I think we will fall short with everyone's expectations, whether that be our own, potentially the developer and the community. And so I think that what has been put by Councillor Burke tonight is the best outcome, taking all of those things into consideration. But I think that this council certainly has been having a lot of conversation about what good outcomes look like in this current planning context, where again we have more frustration with the planning, with the state planning laws that are directing us to focus our attention to a housing crisis, which we absolutely recognise, but taking away lots of those really important local planning considerations. So I'll be supporting this recommendation tonight and hoping that this is an outcome that we can achieve with the developer. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to the mover, councillor Burke. Would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think you you made a good point there that this is the best outcome for a situation that has been very frustrating. I think for all of us, from my point of view, I'm learning a lot about planning and what good housing developments look like, and I think it must be enormously frustrating for those councillors who feel that we've inherited something that probably we wouldn't have approved for in the past. So that's frustrating. But I must say, I congratulate, I think, everyone around the table that we've been able to get through some really challenging discussions, and we've been able to learn from it, and I think therefore that's, and I have enormous empathy for those around the table who wouldn't vote for this, but they understand it's the best outcome we've got. So yeah, it's the best outcome we've got, and I commend it to the council.
Thank you, councillor Burke. So, councillors, as you're aware, this is a motion put by councillor Burke, different to the recommendation that is in the agenda. We all have a copy of that. It has been circulated and discussed, so that's the motion that we're voting on. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? So the motion is carried. Those in favour were councillor Harvey, Dowsley, Price, Shepherd, Burke. Those against was councillor Horn and Landells. Item 12 is community and economic development, and item 12.1 is the draft People, Place, Prosperity Indigo Growth Strategy 2025 to 2035. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council endorses the draft People, Place, Prosperity Indigo Shire Growth Strategy 2025 to 2035 to be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved councillor Landells, seconded councillor Burke. Councillor Landells.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really, I've been looking forward to this strategy for quite a while. In fact, even before I came on council, I remember reading in the news, local news about a year ago, the Wodonga Council had a windfall of $20 million in land that, and it got me thinking, well, good on them, but what are our assets and how can we leverage off that for economic prosperity? And obviously recognising that Indigo Shire is a very unique shire and it's totally different to the local government areas such as Wangaratta and Wodonga, which are more urban and have industrial zones, large industrial estates, etc., etc. So been looking forward to this a lot, and when the document that the draft document that's going out for comment that's before us to discuss is, I believe it really picks up on the uniqueness of Indigo Shire and the uniqueness of each of the individual towns and communities. I really like that so those points of difference are really obvious when you read the document, and the diversity of businesses, that might be in retail strips, but some of them are also a little bit ag-based and farming related, and some of them are operating from home and that kind of thing. So some of the examples given in the document, such as Baker Seeds, Woodstock Flour, Nelmac Engineering, we really do have some unique businesses within and very diverse within Indigo Shire. Also, I just want to point, going towards the back of the document where there's various priorities, and I just wanted to sort of touch on a couple of those. I mean, I'll just pull out a few initiatives such as to try and grow the online presence and business profiles and business-to-business trade via Google listings and digital platforms. I mean, I don't know about other councillors, but it's really frustrating seeing corporate supermarket vans driving around our towns. And I think, that's a lot of money and business that it really speaks to convenience. So I understand why people are doing it, but it makes me think, could we be creating more opportunities for our businesses in a convenient way that our residents could order goods and be better supporting local businesses. Other items like annual business breakfasts. I know a long time ago, Chiltern used to run these, Chiltern Tourism, and I've been a member of Destination Rutherglen for the last 4 years, and they have evening gatherings every quarter. And these type of events are excellent for networking and just getting people to meet each other across the sector. Local food programs, I think, I think this is a really interesting one because I feel like, and this probably taps into my point about the digital platforms. I think that local food programs, we have Goldfield Grocers, been going for decades in Beechworth. We have Diving Barrel Grocer in Yakandanda. We have Chiltern Farm to Plate. But some of these businesses have, they've got real challenges to just be able to keep the doors open because, there's a lot of pressures and cost factors and etc. And just trying to get, greater support from within the communities and whatever. So I think anything that could be done to sort of build up that business to business trade and trying to get, I guess we often talk about buying local and, I guess more money that we can be channeling into local businesses is a really good thing. I do think it, though, taps into the uniqueness of Indigo Shire. It's lovely to drive from town to town and sometimes come across a roadside stall. And there's a few of them around the Shire that are of that nature. And the other point I think is about livability. I really like that this document talks about livability. So it starts to move into some areas that are probably perhaps more around community development, perhaps, but it talks about active transport, for example. And active transport, I was thinking, may even require its own plan because that's quite a detailed thing. But what I also like, there was talk about the holistic service provision for all life stages. So aging in place and ensuring connection, all of these things, whilst they're not, that they're all part of a healthy communities in our Shire. And I suppose I just want to finish off by saying, with my comments, I've got a question as well, but I believe a document like this is about building confidence in business and investment. And we use terms like, I think one of the actions under people is thriving connected communities. We use the word thriving a lot, but it's really important that documents like this is where we put in place the work so that there is confidence and so that communities can thrive. Now, it's okay if I ask, I've got a question for the Director of Community Economic Development, Sally Rice. Council currently has a small team in this area, and this is a very ambitious strategy. Can you please outline how Council intends tackling the challenge of addressing the key priorities in this strategy with what are fairly moderate resources?
Sure. Thanks, Councillor, for the question, and through you, Mayor Price. You're correct, the economic development team is a small, but I have to say very high functioning team. But having said that, it's important to note that the economic development and the stimulation of the economy is the responsibility of all of council, and numerous council departments can and do support economic activity through either direct liaison with business operators or through the services they deliver that enables economic outcomes. So this strategy is really conscious of that whole of council approach. And in fact, a quote from early on in the document, page 6, is as follows: "The role of economic development does not just sit with the economic development team, but is a whole of council responsibility. To succeed in economic development, it needs to be an all departments collaborative endeavour in support of the business and commercial sector." This statement is then entrenched in the strategy's implementation through being through a number of the objectives in the action plan that embed this whole of council approach.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to support the public exhibition of this important strategy document. This is a strong forward-looking framework that will help shape the future of our towns and community spaces. It sets clear priorities to make our public places more welcoming, accessible and vibrant. And I'm pleased to see that housing is a part of this strategic document. Our region is also navigating significant structural change, including the contraction of Victoria's dairy industry, which has long underpinned parts of our Shire. These shifts bring real changes, declining on-farm employment, reduced local spending, and the need to diversify local economies. And this strategy speaks to that. The People Places Prosperity Strategy provides a strong strategic response to all these pressures. By strengthening our town centres and community spaces, it helps position our communities to adapt, attract new investment and maintain vibrant, connected places, even as industries change as they must. It will guide future planning, investment and partnerships to ensure our towns work well for people now and into the future. I commend the executive team who drove this work and the community input from the Indigo Committee for their contribution. I support its exhibition.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. I've chaired the last two Indigo committees. So Indigo is Council's Economic Development Advisory Subcommittee. And there's been some really great discussion and feedback at that committee. So I'd just like to thank those committee members for their input into this draft. I think this is a really good draft document and it's very aspirational. And I really look forward to putting this out on public exhibition and hearing what the community has to say about this document.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I love the photos in this document. When I look at it, it just speaks to me about the vibrancy of our economic group, of our businesses and all the different things that happen within our Shire. Like there's photos of wineries, of the pubs, of the breweries, we're a space of innovation. People like young, especially I love seeing the young people that are coming to our Shire and doing new businesses, and they're putting it all on the line. And I think this document, as well as the photos, gives case studies and talks to how to support those businesses and how to support their families, of course, that are growing within those businesses, because a lot of them have young families, need childcare, and that's all addressed in this document. And sustainable homes, circular economy, climate expectations and change. It's what I think we want to see in going forward in our economy, and I thank the staff for capturing all this information. And as has been said, its tendrils, this document's tendrils go out into lots of other strategies, inform and support other strategies. So I look forward to one of the particular things in this that stood out to me is the buying local, sort of action that they're going to be looking at. And even before we work out how we're going to do that, I just want to say, as people read this document, to think to themselves, how much are they supporting these new, innovative and exciting businesses that we've got happening in the Shire? And don't wait for us to strategise it. Make sure that we're supporting those businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
When we're talking about 90% of our businesses being owned and operated by sole traders and mum and dad situations, And yet we're bringing in 67.5% of total expenditure derives from that mix of businesses. It's very, very important that we look for balance. And I think this plan, the strategic plan, will look to redress those balances that are very vital for for our ongoing situation and the sustainability of all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Landels. Would you like to sum up?
Yes, thanks. So first of all, as others have touched on, I want to say well done to the team that put this together and also acknowledge the volunteers on our Indigo Advisory Committee because it's quite a bit of work to be on an advisory committee, and we really value the expertise and input. And knowing some of those individuals quite well, there's no doubt a lot of robust debate, and it's wonderful that they bring that to that environment. But there's certainly been a lot of work, research, surveying, and consultation generally that's gone into this strategy. So I'd just like to conclude by saying, the People, Place, Prosperity Indigo Growth Strategy 2025 to 35 is now open to the community and various business groups to read through it. And I think you've got 28 days to get feedback, and that's just a really important part of the process that we ensure that the end result, this document, is truly reflective of what the business communities would like to see in Indigo Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.2 is the Event Grants Program for 2025-2026. Before I read out the recommendation, I note we've got 2 conflicts of interest. So if each of those councillors would like to declare their conflict now. Councillor Burke?
Yes, I have a material conflict of interest in relation to the Event Grants Program. I'm the president of the Kiwa Tangambalanga Lions Club, and we applied for one of these grants.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley?
Thank you. I have a material conflict of interest with item 12.2 Event Grants Program 2025-26. I submitted an application on behalf of a committee in this program. I was previously on the committee for the Yakananda Chamber of Commerce. I have since resigned from that committee. However, I was involved in this application.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsing. Councillor Burke, if you'd like to leave the room now while we discuss this item, we'll welcome you back in at the completion. So the item is for decision, and the recommendation is that Council 1 distribute $60,000 to the 2025-26 Indigo Shire Events Grants Program as follows. And there are 22 items listed totaling $60,000. I won't go through each of those. And 2, thank the Event Grants Assessment Panel members for their time in contributing to the assessment process. To have somebody to move that. Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Price. Having been a person who's run many events in Indigo Shire over the years, if you read through it, you'll notice that there were 33 applications in it, some which would have totaled $154,000, and some something around $154,000 and $994, so about $155,000. Yet we only had $60,000 available for this, and of the 33, 22, you could believe? Yes, 22 got full or partial funding, and I must commend the hard work that the assessment panel put in, because these would have been very difficult decisions. I would imagine that all 33 of them probably were worthy events, but then again, there's only $60,000. So they had to assess these events on their viability and how much possibly they could raise themselves if they only got a partial thing. And I think just by looking at it, the Events Grant Assessment Panel done a commendable job, a very difficult job because you couldn't, there's no way you can fund all of them. So they've looked at each and every one, and this time they've made their decision. Now, maybe next time we might have a little more money, or some of the other events might put in a slightly better case, but I commend this report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, when I look at these each year, I always think I need to put them in my calendar. It's just great to see that the community is creating such connection and excitement without council having to do anything other than provide a little bit of funding. You could imagine how much value adding the community do to these events above and beyond the small amount that we give them. They're big commitments and they take a lot of work. I know I attend quite a few of these different events, and I really perhaps have a conflict in that, do I? In that I love to see the community events happening and love to attend. And I also would like to commend the committee. I think it works well. We have a Murray Arts representative, health, people from the health services, Murray Arts, Sports Northeast, Tourism Northeast. And I think that's a really good reflection, as well as a councillor. I think it's a good group of people making decisions around what, how to give that $60,000 to, as you said, a huge expectation from a larger group of people.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
Yes, I'd also like to thank the people involved in making these decisions. And I think, as you'll see from the list, there's a very fair spread across the whole Shire of events and activities. And I know that the people who are involved do take a lot of time and effort to come out with the best outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. I'd also like to comment that I always look at this list and think what a great use of $60,000, because while it's a small amount of money, the community can make it go so much further than we can, and I'm so pleased to see such strong applications from, as we say, a really diverse range of events that really speaks to what our community values. And so I'm really pleased to see those applications. I note in the report it does talk about some risk and opportunity management, and that, you know, the risk in part funding can mean that community events don't go ahead, or they require an extension to the completion date. Most of these groups have been in contact with council officers, and we would certainly encourage that contact, whether it's for feedback with relation to the amount that you've received and how that impacts on your ability to deliver the event that you had planned, or whether it's about strengthening up a future application. We want to support you to put forward really good applications, and we welcome any and all feedback about our grant processes, because we want to strengthen them at every opportunity, and also make sure that they reflect what the community expectation is around them. So to those applicants, successful and unsuccessful, I'd say please reach out to our staff to provide that feedback so that council can continue to strengthen the criteria and the direction to either the panel and the community for what our expectations are around these applications. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Andels.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of chairing this meeting, and you know, I think as picking up on the points other councillors have made about I think Mayor Price, you made the point about, you know, it's $60,000. It's actually really quite a small investment. I mean, it's a significant amount of money. There's no doubt about that, but it gets stretched so much further by the community, and a lot of that is just through volunteering that is involved with so many of these events. The perspectives of the members of the advisory committee, I think, was really interesting because it's quite a diverse advisory committee. We've got an arts organisation, a sport organisation, 2 health organisations, and a tourism organisation. And I think, for example, some of the things that came up, or probably surprised me a little bit, was that there was a lot of support for community carols events, for example. A couple of those have been approved, one in Rutherglen, one in Tangam. And point was made very strongly by one of the advisory committee members about how important these type of events are, because they're a great celebration of community. So, events, I guess, sometimes they fall into strictly community events that might just attract local attendance, and sometimes they're more tourism focused where they will draw people from outside that community and maybe even outside the Shire to events. So I think it's a great program, and I just want to thank the staff who've worked on this and also those advisory committee members as well.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Councillor Harvey, I'll go back to you to sum up.
Just like to say, it's becoming increasingly difficult to run any sort of event with all the rules and regulations, occupational health and safety. I know some of these groups personally. I'm not involved with any of them, but the variety we see here and the very hard work they put in, not only to improve our lives in Indigo Shire, but they make a very significant contribution to our economy. And I just hope we can help them a bit more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now ask Councillor Burke and Dowsley to re-enter. Item 12.3 is the community grants for 2025. And before I'd go any further, there are again 2 councillors that have a conflict of interest with this item. I am one, so I'll now declare that I have a material conflict of interest due to a family member being on one of the committees who has applied for a grant within this program. So I will leave the room and allow the Deputy Mayor to conduct this item. Councillor Harvey, you also have a conflict of interest you'd like to raise with the meeting?
I have a material conflict of interest due to a close family member being a member of one of the committees that applied for a grant in this program, namely my wife is active in the Croquet Club, and she was on the committee that applied for this grant. Thank you.
Okay, as Deputy Mayor, I'll assume the role of Chair while the Mayor is out of the room. So firstly, I'll just read out the recommendation. The recommendation is that Council 1 distributes $50,000 to the Community Grants Program 2025 as follows. And I'm not going to read them all out. There's a list there. There's a table with the applicant name, the project description, and the recommended funding amount. There are 35 grants there proposed to be awarded for a total of $50,000. And item 2, thank the Community Grants Assessment Panel members for their time in contributing to the assessment process. Do I have someone to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd, and seconded Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. So the Indigo Shire Community Grants and Awards Committee assess the applications that comprise of 2 councillors and in a non-voting capacity and 11 appointed committee members who have voting capacity. I just had a question about that before I went. Who were the 2 councillors involved this time?
Might direct that question to Sally Rice, Director, Community and Economic Development.
Okay, great, thank you. So you're in the room, so you can speak to the process. And the 11 appointed community members, were attended as well. Yeah, I'll ask, yes, Sally Rice, if I could, the Director of Community and Economic Development.
I understand through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I understand 5 committee members attended this meeting for this assessment. There are a number of apologies.
Okay, great. Can I just check? So, are we concerned about 5 as compared to 11, or is 5 a quorum? Were we happy with 5? We were.
I understand we were. I wasn't present at the meeting.
Okay.
So one of the councillors that was present might be better to speak to that, but I'm not aware that that was raised as a concern, although it's of ongoing concern in relation to the availability for these meetings of the majority of the panel.
So it might be something we need to look into for the next process next year. Great, thank you. So the applications are assessed against the council approved criteria. The project has to align with the council plan priorities. It has to align with the municipal public health and wellbeing plan, and it has to benefit the local community. And as we can see with the 35 community groups, the projects range from watering system, toilet refurbishment, painting upgrades, training equipment, replacement fence, connect with a cuppa program. So again, across a wide variety of community actions and across a wide shire offering. So look, I'd like to think that all those community groups are pretty excited at getting even a small amount of money. It might not match their budget, but I'm sure that, as we've spoken about with the community events, they are able to stretch the money much more than council is able to with their volunteer capacity. So thank you for the panel, and congratulations to those 35 community groups.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak to the motion as seconder?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I attended this panel assessment as well. I chaired the meeting, and I'd just like to thank the community members on that panel in particular who attended. And they don't just attend, they do a lot of preparation beforehand, going through all of the applications. And, it's a big job for volunteers, but they really enjoy it, and which is evident by just the amount of time and thought and the preparation they've put in before they arrive at the meeting. And there, it has been commented that only 5 could make the meeting. And I think, that is it. I'm sure there's an ongoing challenge about recruiting people to that committee to keep the numbers up and fairly healthy. But I'm always a glass half full person. The 5 people who attended certainly brought a lot of quality collectively to that assessment process. And that they're spread across the Shire. I think there's 1 from Tangambalanga, 2 from Rutherglen, 1 from Waganya, and 1 from Barnawatha. But they certainly have a broad outlook that I would say that they all bring a broad outlook looking at what's best for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
This is a long-standing committee. I believe it started off in 2008. And as everyone has said, the committee members take a great deal of care and consideration when working out the spread of certainly projects, but also the towns in which they're to be utilised. And thank you very much to their efforts.
Any other councillor like to talk to the motion? Councillor Burke.
Yes, thanks. I'd support the other councillors' comments around the what these appear to be somewhat small grants, but a lot of it is sort of seed funding that is put into with to other donations that communities get. And I know in particular the Kiwar Football Club, Netball Club, air conditioning. I've been in those rooms on a hot summer's night, and it's really bad. So to get some air conditioning in that room would be really good. And another one, the Stanley Hall and Athenaeum. Councillor Landells and I were at that hall on Sunday afternoon for a presentation, there was a lecture that was put on there about the Aboriginal history in the area, and it was fascinating. And just the community down there at Stanley is it's just great. They get together and they use the facilities that are there, and I think that's something that I've noticed coming onto council. There's probably nothing more frustrating when you see assets that have either supported by the council or donated by the council not being used to their full extent. So it is really pleasing to see all these assets used properly, and these somewhat small grants help to oil the wheels of all these administrations and these organisations just to keep going and to keep their assets under good condition. So I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I don't share the same view as the other councillors, and should this motion be unsuccessful, I would like to foreshadow an alternate motion to defer this decision. I won't talk about the alternate motion now. I'll debate the current motion on the table. The documentation in this report, along with the confidential attachment, does not give me sufficient confidence that a thorough and transparent governance process has been followed in determining these grant allocations. Of the 35 proposed grants, 33 are recommended for only partial funding, yet there is no explanation as to why some projects are awarded 100%, I think 2 of the 33, others 75%, others 50%, others different amounts, etc. Without that context, I cannot be confident that the evaluation criteria have been applied consistently or that assessment scores have been systematically determined. I appreciate that awarding partial grants may have been well-intentioned, aiming to spread funds more widely. However, in my view, this approach presents significant risks. Applicants may inflate budgets in the future, assuming only partial awards will be given. Local businesses may be pressured to lower their fees or provide more donated or unpaid time and services. Project scopes may be cut back, reducing the community benefits as they've been defined within the grant application, and gaps may place additional fundraising pressure on our community members. For me, proper governance would include clear scoring, transparent rationale for funding levels, and confidence that public funds are being allocated fairly and systematically. There are some comments in the confidential attachment, which I can't read out, which also further exacerbate my concern, as these comments do not reflect the criteria stated in the report for determining these grant applications. I'm just going to go back and the project aligns with council plan priorities, the project aligns with the municipal public health and wellbeing plan, and the project benefits the local community. There are comments within the confidential attachment outside of the scope of these assessment criteria, further giving me concern. I cannot support the allocations as presented because I cannot be confident they reflect proper stewardship of public money. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to summarise?
Yes, I think after each of these programs every year of us giving out our community grants, we have an opportunity to review and raise any concerns that we may have about the process. And I can understand that you may want to discuss, we may all want to discuss why some of these this year seem to be partly funded as compared to other years. But then I'm very aware that it's our process and we have given the guidelines, and we have asked the staff and the community and the different members of all the different committees to make these decisions. We've given them the guidelines, we've asked them to work to that, and they've, as far as I can see, they have done their best. If there are concerns around it, I think it's good to look and discuss this once the process has been. I can see that you may have concerns, but I don't have similar. I haven't heard that from the rest of the members here today, but absolutely, let's review and let's talk about some of your concerns at the next opportunity.
Thank you. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the current motion on the table? Thank you. All those against? So just to confirm, for we have councillors Shepherd, Burke, Landell and Horn, and against councillor Dowsley. I'll just get the other members back in the room.
Item 13 is infrastructure services, and item 13.1 is the community sustainability grants for 2025-26. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 distributes $17,070, excluding GST, to the 2025-26 Community Sustainability Grants Program as follows. There's 6 applicants and projects listed with recommended funding beside them, totaling the $17,000 and $17,070, sorry. And 2, thanks the Community Sustainability Grants Assessment Panel members for their time in contributing to the assessment process. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Landell, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Landells.
Indigo Shire does a fantastic job, I think, supporting community through grant programs, and we've just spoken about the event grants. We have community grants. We've spoken about that. A few months ago was the Active Indigo grants, and now the community sustainability grants. And I was a little bit surprised that there was a smallish number of applicants, but one thing I do want to touch on is that the work of land care groups, for example. I know 3 of the applicants being recommended for funding are land care groups, and I'm always amazed at the exceptional work that land care groups undertake in our communities. And we have a number of them right throughout Indigo Shire. And, they do wonderful work, often revegetating areas that are overgrown with weeds and blackberries, etc., and those sort of things. So I think it's really important that we have programs around that can encourage them. They're not massive. It's not a particularly large fund. I know that we allocated $21,745 to this program, and it was undersubscribed, which is a little bit unusual, perhaps, certainly compared to our other grant programs, which are often oversubscribed considerably. But I just would commend each of the applicants, and look forward to those sustainable projects being undertaken in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, thanks. Enough said.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsey?
Thank you. Yes, just a brief comment. I've read through all of these. I've looked at the confidential attachment. Very pleasing to see that each of the applicants has been scored against the criteria, in this case, 4 different criteria. Each of the assessments has comments and to validate the scoring, and I can see that this is a very robust process.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Could I just thank the committee, because again, it's a bit of work to have to turn up with all this scored and read the applications. So Philippa Noble and Rick Thwaites, and then of course Isla Fitteridge is the manager of that particular sustainability area. So thank you for the work you did in this.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Lendels. Would you like to sum up?
I don't have too much extra to add, but I would just like to also thank staff in this area, Isla, and also committee members Rick Thwaites and Philippa Noble for their work. They've obviously long term been involved in sustainability projects, and it's we are very fortunate to have that kind of expertise volunteering on our advisory committees.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.2 is the Road Management Plan 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council adopts the Road Management Plan 2025. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd.
This document outlines our management of Shire roads, pathways and associated infrastructure, outlining the hierarchy of management and schedule and process of maintenance, including very specific response times for defects and a provision for exceptional circumstances. So it's quite clearly laid out for especially community to understand how long it's going to take for something to be repaired. Changes from the previous road management plan are addition of cycling tracks, inclusion of emergency response time frame, update response time to align with MAV recommendations, and addition of curb and channel response times.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thanks. This is probably, I think it was last month, we had an asset management plan come to council, so it sort of sits within that framework a bit, and it's an unusual, it's called a road management plan, and as I understand it, it's required compliance, I suppose, under the Road Management Act. The council produce one of these every year. I do know it's got very heavy emphasis on maintenance as opposed to management, but it is an important document. It does give us a good understanding of the current state of our roads and also our processes that we have in place for identifying hazards and also maintaining the state of the roads. I do have a couple of questions for Acting Director of Infrastructure, Nathan Mullane, and there's quite a long list of stakeholders on page 3 of this plan, and I was surprised that there isn't community engagement with this plan. It's not conducted for some reason. Can you explain what that reason is?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Council, for the question. There is a lot of stakeholders listed in the road management plan. We certainly acknowledge that our transport network touches everyone within the Shire, and we engage regularly with a number of different groups. This particular plan, there hasn't been a whole lot of engagement in the reformulation of it. It is, as you mentioned, transactional generally in nature, and it sort of sets the lowest standard that we would use for our risk management purposes for managing our roads and footpaths and networks. But we certainly strive for a higher objective than what's set out in this minimum standard. We also intend that because we are going no lower in our standards and in actually potentially adding some categories that were noted and tightening a couple of timeframes that we believe we're going over and above what we'd have to do. And we don't see a whole lot of opportunity for community to really shape too much here when we already know we are operating best practice with those MAV guidelines that we've applied and adhering to at the moment. So certainly keen to hear from community whenever we identify an issue or they identify an issue with the network, but in this particular circumstances, we didn't intend to go out and engage widely at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
I'd like to ask a question, please. Nathan, the betterment of situations, is that covered in this report? As in not returning their work that's done to the level it was at before the event?
I think I understand your question, Councillor. It generally doesn't. So it's addressing more how we monitor and inspect the assets that we have and when we determine a need to actually intervene and undertake repairs. So it's about hazard management and trying to make sure that our roads and our paths and our curb and channel and our bike paths are safe and acceptable for the community to use. They identify when we determine something requires maintenance intervention or whether it requires some signage or barricading to keep people safe. We then intervene and repair it back to the standard that it needs to be at. But betterment and enhancement of sort of those assets isn't covered under this program or under this plan. It would normally be something we would do at the table in a budget process or post a significant natural disaster that might have taken the asset out totally, and then we can have that determination about whether we might make it better than it was. But this is about helping us manage to what we have and to the standards we need to.
To a standard. Thank you very much. So it's really on a one-to-one basis.
It's generally responding and identifying hazardous situations as and where they may occur. So we regularly inspect the network at night. During the day, we have our guys that are out there all the time. Our crews that are out there all the time. And it gives us a guidance around whether we need to actually, as I said, make something safe, address it back to its pre-existing condition. So repair the pothole, patch up the footpath that might be broken. But yeah, it doesn't really give us an overarching management intention for our assets. It really allows us those guidelines when we know to intervene and repair or make good a defect or an issue that might have happened with our footpaths or our curb channels or as such. So it's a Road Management Act requirement. It only covers those things that sit in the road corridor. So there's a whole lot of other things that we also manage every day, but in this particular case, it's just about the management of hazards and issues in the road corridor.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels, you have spoken as seconder, is that correct? Yep, so you've had your opportunity to speak, or did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got another question.
Yep.
Sorry. Another question for Acting Director of Infrastructure, Nathan Mullane. I'm aware that when I looked at this plan, it looked to me like it is what it is, but I'm looking for something that's broader that really talks about transport within the towns in our shire and across our shire and how our transport systems work to service the towns and rural communities. And it was shared with us recently internally that Shire's been working on a transportation plan since mid last year. Are you able to give an update on where that is, please?
Yes, certainly. You're correct. There are other strategic documents we have in place and in motion at the moment. The transportation strategy development commenced mid last year, 2024. We did community consultation via Engage Indigo. We used a separate traffic consultant to help us with shaping that strategy. It's got to a draft stage. It has just held up a little bit at the moment, just with sort of when we went into the council process for the elections, we did stop it for a little while. We've unfortunately just had a departure of our asset manager, so we've still got to backfill in that position. So the plan is just in a little bit of a holding state at the moment. We do intend to get back to it to finish that transportation strategy, along with some car parking plans for the municipality as well. So that transport strategy will identify actions that we can take across the whole transport network, whether it be a footpath or a walking trail or a cycle path, our roads, and set out some strategic direction that we might hope to take there. So yeah, that piece of work we're hoping will be finished by or certainly be out for consultation towards the end of this year. We should be able to get towards finishing that and having a draft available for people.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up? No? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillors, we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, and so I'd like to propose an adjournment, and I can do so as the chairperson if there's no objections from a councillor. If there are, we can put it to the vote as a procedural motion. I'm proposing an adjournment just for 5 minutes. I think we're roughly halfway through the agenda, so in the interest of good decision making, it might be appropriate to have just a 5-minute break. If everyone's happy with that, then we'll adjourn the meeting and return at 8:23. We'll make that 6 minutes just to give ourselves that 1 extra minute. Thank you, councillors. Return to the meeting. So now we will go to item 13.3, the draft public toilet strategy. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council endorses the draft public toilet strategy for public exhibition for a period of at least 28 days. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Horn, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn?
Well, this toilet strategy is very, very important with all the tourists and visitors that we have, plus the local people. What's the first thing you talk about when you go on anywhere is the roads, but certainly public toilets come in second. So, yeah, we need to have a very interesting talk about this.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, this is from our last council plan and our last council. And it's taken a while to get to us, but I am very excited to have it here. I have got a real thing about toilets. Yep, I'm coming out with that now. And I just want to tell you a little story. There's one toilet in Maya Albury that I often mused about the changes in my life from when I was a young woman to now an elderly woman. And dashing there heavily pregnant, then taking my baby, knowing that there was a change table and feeding space, dashing with a toilet training toddler, trying to make it in time, cramming 4 children into one cubicle, trying to encourage them, all of them to go at once, so I didn't have to return again. Now, as an older woman, knowing that when I need to go, I need to go. So it's probably a gendered thing, because I know when we've talked about the toilet strategy over all these years, the men just sort of like, I can just see them go, it's the toilet. But I don't know, is it gendered? It's a really important thing for not only me, but the fact that there are also access issues for the elderly and disabled, confidence in cleanliness, and access for parents and young children. I think clean, accessible toilets that are appropriate for all members of our communities, visitors and local alike, it's just a non-brainer in terms of creating livable, connected and confident communities. This document shows us, it's really a state of the moment on our toilets, on our facilities, which ones we own, which ones we're responsible for, what level they are, basic, standard. There's none I note that, I don't know what the high level is for those, but we're not there. Excellent, perhaps. And it also outlines our concern around it, them being accessible to all genders, to be comfortable for elderly or young, whoever, to attend, and for them to be in places that are accessible for not only tourists but community members. It means if there's a toilet, it often means that people will leave their house because they feel comfortable in knowing that there's a clean space that's accessible to them. So it may be a bit of a laughable moment, but it's also, I think, a really very important document. And I'm really looking forward to working out how we're going to fund some of this, because it's great to have the document in hand and it's great to see how some of our toilets need to be raised. We need to raise their standard, but and we also really need a couple of new toilets, especially the one at the Yakandanda Rail Trail down at the sports park. And how are we going to fund that? That's probably a really important discussion, and I'm not sure yet where we're going with that.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Yeah, okay, hard act to follow there, Councillor Shepherd, but occasionally I do, yeah. Believe it or not, I'm also approaching that old status, so you know. I will yeah, well, I think it's actually in all seriousness, it's a good point of difference for council to have a public toilet strategy. I don't know how common that is for our local government, but it is important because, as Councillor Horn mentioned, it often goes. It's one of those things. I guess it's like unspoken a little bit, but we all do it. We all make assessments on towns and shires based on the state of their public toilets. I do it often when I'm travelling around. I think, gee, that, I often, even in our shire, maybe since I've been a councillor, I've been taking advantage of the QR codes outside toilets and sending through a bit of feedback here and there. Because it is important that they're well maintained, but also that their access issues are addressed. And I did notice, I went to a toilet recently in Rutherglen that was an older style toilet, had very narrow doorways, and I started to think about access for people with, mobility aids and things like that. And then I thought, and I noticed in this strategy, it talked about that, about where we set the standard, I guess, as far as the priority, I guess, how we determine access and where we would upgrade to give access, what toilets would fit that model and which ones wouldn't, etc. So anyway, I think it's a good document, and it, as I say, point of difference. If we're doing this and we're doing it well, I think that's a very positive thing for Indigo Shire, particularly when we've got such a heavy focus on tourism. It's important to look at all sorts of amenities for tourists and for locals alike.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'd add my comments to say I think that toilets are absolutely about an access issue, and I think that as you sort of alluded to, Councillor Shepherd, when I'm choosing which park I'll take my kids to, it's generally based on what cafe is around and what toilet facilities are available. That means that I can go to the park and enjoy myself as much as the kids can enjoy themselves and sort of tend to their own needs. And we know that we've got good facilities and good hospitality nearby. I've also been there with the Access Committee when they've reviewed the new toilets at the Chiltern Community Hub and commented on the contrast in colours in those toilets and really highlighted the importance of that contrast in making them an accessible space for people. And I think that during COVID, we were very aware of exactly which toilets did not have the provision of soap and warm water, as people were really had heightened awareness of that, and it would sort of really was brought to our attention that the standard of facilities needed to be had to have some equality right across the Shire. So for all those reasons, I think that they are really they're ancillary to all of our assets and an important part for us to keep a focus on for community, for tourists. And so I do welcome us having this really good strategic look at it, and seeing where we can fund some of these priorities. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Horn if you'd like to sum up. Nothing further? Great. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.4 is contract extension for contract 23/6341, supply of mobile maintenance services on council's plant, equipment and fleet. The item is for decision, and the recommendation is that Council 1 awards a 1-year extension of contract 23/6341 for the supply of mobile maintenance services on council's plant, equipment and fleet to Spanners and Sparks. And 2, notes the total value of works delivered under the contract varies annually, typically between $350,000 and $400,000 per annum. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Burke?
No, that's nothing to say.
Councillor Harvey?
And just that this has proved to be a very efficient way of servicing our equipment, and I think we should continue with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.5 is the Beechworth Caravan Park lease. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes that no submissions were received in response to the public notice advising of the proposed Beechworth Caravan Park lease following the decision of council at its February meeting. 2, accepts the expression of interest and subsequent negotiations of lease terms and approves that a lease be offered to Mexicala Proprietary Limited and/or nominee, provided any nominee is satisfactory to council's chief executive officer, having regard to the EOI process for the operation of Beechworth Caravan Park at Lake Samble, commencing on the 1st of April 2026 and for a period of 21 years, and with the following terms with details provided in the confidential attachment. A, the annual rental amount payable will be based on a percentage of the caravan park's annual revenue determined by the competitive EOI process, including a minimum rent guarantee. B, the lessee will be required to invest into developing the park in line with the adopted master plan. C, council commits to funding its share of capital works to support the implementation of the master plan. And D, council commits to putting aside 10% of the annual rental income into a council-controlled reserve to support maintenance and minor capital works on a council-owned infrastructure within the park. 3, notes that a funding agreement between both parties to the lease detailing council's financial commitment to implementing the master plan will be developed and be an attachment to the final lease. 4, delegates authority to the CEO to finalise the details and execute lease documents, including the funding agreement on its behalf. 5, approves the transfer of the current lease to Mexicala Proprietary Limited and/or nominee, provided any nominee is satisfactory to council's chief executive officer, having regard to the EOI process from the 1st of December 2025 or any other negotiated settlement date between the current and proposed new tenant until the lease expiry on the 31st of March 2026. And 6, notes that both the current and proposed new leases are Crown leases and require the consent of DECA to transfer or establish. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think it's very easy to be a bit complacent about just going through an EOI process and getting making sure we get a reputable operator for this. But this is a really important contract. To have a good, reputable provider of one of our key drivers of tourism in Beechworth is very important. I think we've got a very good provider here. It was great to see in their plans for the future that they have a good growth plan, and I think we're able to support that. There will be a capital injection into the site, and that's good to keep the assets fresh. And yeah, it's just I think it's a really good outcome, and I recommend support of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, thanks. I would also touch on the fact that, like it is in this particular caravan park and caravan parks in general are very important assets. The council manages on Crown land, and that we talked earlier about the economic development strategy, and that there's, to me, I see that these definitely have some capacity to contribute positively to the economic development of the Shire and also to councils. There's investment required by council, but there's also rent income that comes back to council that makes some very significant long-term investments. It's been two applicants in the expression of interest process, and but both, I think, put forward, from what I could see from documentation, strong proposals, and I'm satisfied that with the recommendation that's here for us to offer that lease to Mexicala Proprietary Limited. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsey?
Thank you. should this motion be unsuccessful, I would like to foreshadow an alternate motion for deferral. There's a few things in this report that concern me. In the recommendation, there's commentary there around council committing to funding its share of capital works, and noting that a funding agreement between both parties to the lease detailing council's financial commitment to implementing the master plan will be developed and will be an attachment to the final lease. This motion essentially gives authority to the CEO to negotiate that lease. In the final page of the report, under the financial implications, it talks about an expectation that council's contribution will be funded from borrowings, and that a funding agreement detailing the terms of this contribution will be developed and attached to the final lease. Now, I understand I've thoroughly been through all of the documents associated with this paper. There are 4 confidential attachments detailing obviously very commercial in confidence information that can't be released to the public around these submissions and around the proposed financing of these capital works. And I guess I've read all those in detail, asked a lot of questions of council staff over the last few days in regards to those borrowings and the impacts of those on council's budget over the next period of time, up to 21 years of this proposed lease length. I want to make it clear I'm not questioning the proposed EOI to be awarded, and I'm certainly also not questioning that the upgrade of this caravan park is beneficial to council over the duration of the lease. I guess what I've been concerned about is servicing of borrowings in the very short term. We've talked a lot in previous council meetings about the financial pressures that local government is currently under in a rate capped environment, and we're very aware of our limited capacity to fund projects. And although a lot of information has been provided to me from council staff and provided to all of the councillors from council staff up until as late as just before this meeting today, I'm just not 100% confident that I've had enough time to thoroughly consider all of that information, and therefore that's why I would be proposing an alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Could I ask a question, please, of our acting CEO? So Sue and Roger Humphreys have been there for 19 years and have done a great job, I think, as the community, and we can all see that they've been really great as managing that caravan park. I'm just wondering what happened in the process. We're only looking at 2 here. I know that we've discussed it, but I think the community will be wondering, where are they in this process?
Acting CEO Ian Ellett.
Thank you for the question. Through the Mayor, at the moment, I guess I'd be concerned about divulging information that we would still consider confidential while this matter's being debated and ruled on. So, yeah, I might refrain from providing any more info on that.
Other comments, Councillor Shepherd?
Just that Mexicala, I went deep looking them up in everything that I could, and I see that they manage lots of caravan parks and seem to do a good job. I like that they are happy to that they're considering eco and accessibility accreditation. I think they are both very important aspects of modern caravan parks. And I'm not as concerned around the funding. I appreciate that Councillor Dowsey has really assisted me in understanding the figures around this, and I really appreciated the opportunity for a number of times now to discuss with the finance department around how we can fund this. And I felt confident that the lease was going to cover our loan, depending on the length of the loan and any, of course, extenuating circumstances. But I feel comfortable in that space. But I'm happy to endorse this EOI process.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'd also like to comment on this process, having been on the council when we adopted the master plans and really been through the conversation about the opportunities within these parks, the aspirations of the parks, and the maturity, the increasing maturity that we can see in these parks. I'm really pleased to see this current proposal in front of us. I think that Roger and Sue have been fantastic operators of this park and have certainly established themselves as incredible members of the Beechworth community for what they've offered as community members, but also as the operators of the caravan park. I'm confident in the process that has taken place, and I think that it's really important to reflect to our community that we have absolutely scrutinised this process, recognising that this is a significant lease and it requires all of our attention. And so I'm confident that I've had that reflected to me. I want to ask a question to the acting CEO about Councillor Dowsley talked about what we're delegating to the CEO. From my reading, lots of those lease components are within the recommendation, and so then within the jurisdiction of council's decision tonight. Is it correct to say that, or are lots of them reflected in the delegation to the CEO, acting CEO Ian Ellett?
Thank you. I might just get you to just clarify the question.
So the components of the lease that Councillor Dowsey was referring to that would be delegated to the CEO, largely I see them reflected in the recommendation, and so therefore I would suggest within the remit of the council decision. Is that largely the way that it's described?
Yeah, okay. So my description of that would be the key lease terms are absolutely decision of council, and I suppose the way the recommendation is formed, recognising that parts of council's decision refer to components which are sitting in a confidential attachment, so the level of investment and the like. I think, or certainly the intention of what's being delegated to the CEO in this recommendation is purely around what the clauses look like, what the actual lease document. So at the moment, there is a draft bouncing back and forth between each party and their solicitors to try and reach a point of, in anticipation of a council decision, that we can be as ready to go. And so there's clauses change and the like. And then similarly within a funding agreement, the funding agreement is very much not to establish the quantum of funds to be provided by council. That's embedded in the recommendation to council, but it's more the terms and what are the obligations on either party in relation to that funding agreement, and recognising that it's a serious amount of money that council would be providing to the operator for improvements in council-owned infrastructure, and then we need to consider our own procurement obligations, good governance, value for money, and those things, and just managing the risk of that. So that's where I suppose we've got lawyers, and the suggestion is that the finer detail that would happen outside the council process, council give the direction of the broad parameters, the key terms, and then the drafting of the documents happens between legal people, and we look for the CEO to be delegated to sign off.
Great, thank you. I'd also like to say, similar to Councillor Shepherd, thank you to Councillor Dowsey for raising the questions, and to our staff for their responding to all of our questioning of the finances. It is really important that we have that discussion as a strategic discussion, because while these parks and these master plans we always knew required quite an uptick in the level of investment. We have to see that that is a worthwhile investment for our communities, for our tourism offering, and that we can also manage business as usual and other important strategic projects over the term of seeing these improvements. So I'd reflect that I am confident that I have had sufficient responses from staff to say that I think we can do both, and I think that's an important component, particularly in the environment we're in at the moment, where we have to think seriously on the financial sustainability of our council. But I am confident in those responses, and so therefore I'm really looking forward to what this new lease arrangement looks like. Similarly to Councillor Shepherd, I've been looking at Mexicala and their offering and all of the presence that they have in different locations, and I'm really excited as I think about what the next few years for Beechworth looks like and all of the different opportunities that are coming towards us. I think this is a fantastic outcome for the town, and I hope that this really supports the community, supports the accommodation offering, supports the businesses, and is a good decision of Indigo Shire Council as well. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
I would like to ask a question, please, of CEO, acting CEO. Is this a time-sensitive issue?
Just to clarify the question, time sensitive in terms of council making a decision versus a deferral?
Yes.
Okay, look, I guess my response to that is it's not absolutely critical, but it certainly is time sensitive. The new lease would take effect at the expiry of the current lease, so that's end of March next year, or 1 April for a new lease. I suppose it's interesting when we go through these processes, and the bit that we don't control is in this case, and similar to Rutherglen last year, we're making a decision about who we'd like to operate the park going forward. Their ability to negotiate, the sale of a business or purchase of assets, transition of business is something that happens where we don't get involved. So we rely really heavily on those parties being able to work together and come up with a suitable transition. In this one here, where are we? We're at the end of September. What they have in principle worked out together is that they would transition on the 1st of December. What I've learned, and I'm not an expert in that, is that any time post-Christmas in that early part of the year is a really not a great time to be transitioning that business. So I think that works for them. If we deferred it by a month, what would continue in the background is development and negotiation of lease terms. I think it would impact on the transition of the business and whether that made it too hard for a 1 December. I think it creates uncertainty and probably a level of angst for the staff and both parties. And I think Mexicala's position, well, they've tendered on this, and they're professional organisation, they will deal with whatever the decision making is. I guess I feel for the other parties who are making decisions, and it's their livelihood. So I think every week or month we delay, that makes it really hard. I'm really mindful. Roger and Sue Humphreys' names were mentioned before. So as they've become aware in recent weeks of where our recommendation lies, they've played a pretty straight bat to any inquiries they've had in the community. They've not gone out and told people, but then we reach this sort of funny period when we publish a council meeting agenda mid last week. We're therefore naming in the public arena Mexicala's name. So we have this sort of awkward few days where we don't sort of say anything, and we're ready to go with a joint media release should council make a decision. If we don't, I guess that just prolongs that, and I would say that that's sort of an awkward time. But look, I certainly understand concerns raised by Councillor Dowsley, and if that's council's decision. But I think that there's a few factors that would certainly be on the sensitive side that I would suggest a more timely decision is a far better outcome.
Councillor Horn, any further comments other than your question? No? Any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Burke. Would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll just sum up by just noting or highlighting one of the notes that are in the report that that there was given that it's an EOI and they can be problematic, but it's good to see that a probity advisor from a well-regarded chartered accounting firm who was appointed to oversee the whole process and to offer guidance on probity and governance issues. And throughout the process, they raised no concerns whatsoever in terms of how the EOI and subsequent evaluation process was conducted. So I think that can give us some comfort that it was a good process that's been well executed.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. So those in favour was Councillor Harvey, Price, Shepherd, Burke, Landells. Those against was Councillor Horn and Dowsley. We'll now go to item 13.6, the monthly capital works report for July 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council notes the August 2025 capital works report and year to date to progress in the delivery of the capital works program. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just going through the report, I suppose in the capital works commentary, I'd just like to ask Nathan Malone, our acting director of infrastructure services. You've noted in here that we're only at 2.5% of the budgeted program, whereas this is at the end of August, of course, that of course being 16% into the year. So I'd just like some comments around that as to what's causing the delays and the future for the program for the whole year.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, for the question. Yeah, we are unfortunately a little bit behind where we would have typically liked to be at this time of year. A couple of projects been delayed just with some planning matters. Unfortunately, they're mostly behind us now. A couple of other projects had slightly longer lead times than we'd expecting in relation to probably steel supply. So even the toilet that we spoke about before, the toilet up at Tangam has been taking a little bit longer to get delivered to site than we would have hoped. The Barmutha Park cricket facility, the steelworks there is going up at the moment, but that was a little bit slower than we'd hoped. So there's some delays still in supply chains that sometimes impact us. But we have now awarded a number of contracts and got boots on the ground, and we hope to see acceleration over the coming months towards the end of the year, catching ourselves back up.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, look, just would have similarly commented on, I guess, the slow start to the year, but I'm sure that the team will pick that up as we move forward. The only other comment I would make, looking at the attachment, the Capital Works Monitor report, you can see on there that a number of projects have started. You can see that the year-to-date actuals are reflected in that document. I guess the only project that I would highlight is a slight overspend on the Beechworth Bowling Club roof. I understand that the spending is in line with our initial estimates that had subsequently been revised down. So yeah, just keeping a close eye on project budgets and completion over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Burke. Would you like to sum up?
No, that's all done. Thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14 is Office of the CEO, and item 14.1 is the Community Engagement Policy. The item is for decision, and the recommendation is that Council adopts the Community Engagement Policy. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Shepherd.
New council term and an opportunity to review the community engagement policy. In February 2021, in response to the new legislative requirements. We did our first one, and I think it's worked well for the 4 years, and we've had this out for review. We haven't had any reflections back on it from the community. But in terms of the council plan feedback, which happened, I suppose, earlier this year, some of the feedback from that has been included. So the positive feedback was that recognition that council provides various opportunities for engagement and appreciation for helpful and responsive staff. But then there were areas that people identified for improvement, concern about directive consultation, whereas the updated policy strengthens commitments to genuine two-way engagement and clearer articulation of how community input will influence decisions. There was feedback about closing the loop. People weren't necessarily finding out what their feedback, what happened with their feedback. So outcomes are communicated back to participants. New dedicated section 6.1 specifically addressing traditional owner engagement protocols and requirements, and community meeting frequency policy supports increased face-to-face engagement opportunities and diverse participation methods. So I think this is this underlies every department in Indigo Shire. This is a very vital policy and document, and it informs every area how to engage with the community and when they should engage with the community. I think this is becoming quite a mature document now, and I commend this to the councillors for endorsement.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Sorry, can I just also thank Melinda Collis for the great work she does in this area. Basically, is she on her own? Anyway, congratulations. I think it's a lot of work that she does, and this is a good document.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Andels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, thanks. I'd also like to just reiterate the great work that Melinda does in this area, and I know up until recently she did have an offsider also in that area, so I'm not sure whether we've filled that role after that person left. But yeah, it's a community engagement is becoming increasingly complex, and it really does require policies around how, like I do notice that we're required to do this under the Local Government Act, but I think even if we weren't required to, it'd be a really important and necessary to have a policy that outlines how we're going to go about engaging with the community. I'm not sure what to make of the fact that we put it out for public comment and we didn't get any feedback. You know, it seems a bit ironic in a way, but maybe I guess you could sort of draw the conclusion that, well, a couple of things you could say, we're either doing extremely well or maybe we didn't engage very well with the community. I don't know. But it is what it is. And I guess the other thing is it's a work in progress. As we know, technology changes, communities change and evolve, and we've constantly got to be looking at how this policy is going to work best for the communities that we work with, and also for council staff and all the different areas where we need to be in touch with the community.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I suppose the one thing that I wanted to stress here and just talk about was the engagement policy that we have is, and I understand why, is very IT, social media centric, and I think that works and that's good, but there is still a group in the community who are not IT savvy. They're not on Facebook, and it's a challenge to make sure that, you know, whatever the percentage is it 10%, is it 20%, is it 2%? How do we make sure that we just don't leave them behind? And that's something that I'm very aware of. I am reminded often in my community about that, that there's a very strong and vocal cohort who are not on Facebook and not on social media. But I also see social media works. I put on my Facebook page the grand final celebrations of the Kiwa Sandy Creek Football Club. I just happened to be standing in the middle of the oval, and they're out there having their final sunset sing of the club song, and I put that on Facebook, and I got 11,500 views. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that makes me an influencer yet, but anyway. Anyway, so my point is just to, how do we keep connected with people who are not connected?
Yeah, that leads nicely into probably what I'd like to say about that as well, that I was pleased to see that as an inclusion within the policy, accessible communications. I think that is really important, that while we do talk about the fact that we do have a really extensive reach on some of those channels, that we can't leave people behind. And so the real nod to exactly that, providing non-digital alternatives, utilising our community networks and local groups and word of mouth communication, but also making sure that we partner with lots of those community organisations. I'm just really pleased to see that that's reflected in there, because we will continue to take leaps and bounds with all of the best channels that we've got. But we have to make sure that it's not at the expense of a section of our community. And I'd just recognise as well that I'm pleased, as Councillor Shepherd said, with the increase in maturity in this policy, but also the maturity of the discussion with our staff, and the fact that they're happy to be pushed on this, happy to receive the constant feedback, good, bad, and otherwise, and reflect that to the organisation on what our engagement looks like and where it's been well received and where it needs improvement. So pleased to receive this policy. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up? No? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.2 is Councillor Professional Development Policy. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council adopts the Councillor Professional Development Policy. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Landells, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landells.
Yeah. So professional development, it's a very important part of being a councillor, and obviously this current council has 4 new councillors, so it's certainly, I probably speaking from my own experiences, there's a lot of areas that throughout my career that I guess we all bring certain skills to the table, but there's also going to be other skills, and particularly in local government, it's a very unique sector, and there's a lot of need to have a high level of professional understanding and skill, and I guess having a policy that guides how that is how those skills are attained by councillors and kept up to date. And there's obviously changes in the Local Government Act and different legislation that comes through from time to time. So it's just making sure that I guess we have the skill set required to undertake this role, and professional development policies sort of help to ensure that that occurs in a manner that is thorough and well thought through.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
I think Councillor Landells has pretty much covered it. This, mandatory training is a requirement under the Local Government Act and regulations. This policy was put out for public exhibition and no feedback was received. It's really about just having a structure around the delivery of that mandatory training for all councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Harvey.
Just to say that our job is becoming increasingly complex, particularly since 2020 and 2024, the amendments, and to try to navigate all the complexities of our job and the rules and regulations and how we can work it to our advantage. I found this professional development invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'd also say it's good to, I think that in the term of the previous council, we certainly looked at a recommendation that came through from IBAC about what best practice looked like for induction, and it did talk about a program of continuous induction, and certainly the organisation was very welcoming of that suggestion from the councillor group that we could incorporate something similar. And had been making lots of inroads to do exactly that. I think that when you look at the induction program that councillors are expected to undertake at the beginning of their term, there's so much to learn at such a short time frame that you can see that that would not be best practice. And so by making this a legislative requirement now, I think it really does put the emphasis on making sure that that training is useful, making sure that we're keeping up to date with our professional development. The role is, as you say, constantly training. So I don't think that I don't think this role is any better suited to people who've been here for quite a while now. I think that there's something new every day, and so the emphasis is no more on new councillors than it is councillors that have been around for a while. If anything, it's probably more important for councillors that have been here for quite some time and need to continue to adapt to the current environment. So welcome the policy and pleased to say, as I say, that we were starting to incorporate this when IBAC recommended that it was part of best practice before the legislative requirement. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Landells. Would you like to sum up?
No, thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.3 is the draft advocacy action plan. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the draft advocacy action plan 25 to 29 for public exhibition for a period of 28 days from the 1st of October 2025 and invites submissions. 2, if no submissions are received during the public exhibition period, the plan is adopted from the 29th of October 2025. And 3, if submissions are received during the public exhibition, the plan is to be brought to a future council meeting for adoption. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd?
Again, this is now a very mature document. I can remember when it was a one-pager with just a list of things that we thought we needed to advocate for, and that was what the CEO and the Mayor took with them wherever they went and handed that out. Whereas this document, I'm sure a one-pager goes with it as well for those ones you just want to put in your pocket, but this particular document goes through a three-tiered approach. So tier 1, planned and proactive, and it has our highest priority issues requiring sustained intensive advocacy efforts. And then the list there, which I think most of them would be pretty obvious to our community on what that list is. Tier 2, opportunistic, important issues where we pursue opportunities as they arrive. And tier 3 is responsive, issues that may arise quickly and require timely advocacy responses. And for each of those, there's the roles and responsibilities and the relevant officers. So there's also a small bit on implementation monitoring, but this is a really valuable list that I think helps anyone within our Shire when someone asks them what are our major priorities. We've already ascertained what they are and what are our priorities for different areas within our Shire. We've already ascertained what they are. So again, thank you very much to Mel Collis for the great work that she's done here, and I absolutely endorse this document for you to take in your pocket when you go.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder?
I would like to strongly encourage the members of the public to have a really good look at this and react to it and put their ideas forward as well.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yeah, I was really impressed by this plan too. It is very mature, and all I really knew before I became a councillor that I went on the website and under advocacy there were about 10 points listed. And I thought, oh, well, that's good. Yep, it's good to know what we're advocating for. But the document is, split into, as Councillor Shepherd outlined, into three different tiers. And it really speaks to the challenges of local government. Really, we look at, the water infrastructure, or we talk about, service levels around, health. One that I probably notice a bit, which probably lower down the list, I think it's under tier 3, is just our youth services team, the amazing work they do, and yet youth services funding is always short-term contracts, and it really is not conducive to trying to bring on board professional staff and high quality services. So I think, but there's a whole range of things in this advocacy plan that are going to be really important for our council going forward, just to try and make sure that we can get the resourcing and that our communities expect. Because as we all know, there's cost shifting and there's constantly councils are being asked to do more with less, and you've got to say at some point, well, at some point there's a limit to that. You can get as creative as you want with doing more with less, but technology helps a bit. But but it's great to have a plan like this. I think that does help us to that there are opportunities to lobby and to try to get better outcomes for our communities ultimately, and a plan like this really helps.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think this document looks amazing, and while that might seem like a small thing to say, when you are competing against every other council who also has an advocacy action plan, it's important that yours stands out. And so this one really does. And as I look at each image, I think they've been really carefully chosen. On the front page is a road being sealed. I think that it's really important that that they are carefully designed advocacy action plans, and I've also, to reflect back to the councillor group, seen how the format of this document can be changed to be a double-sided page reflecting one of our individual priorities. And again, what a fantastic document that looks like when we've got an amazing photo representing what the issue is, and it's a great snapshot of that issue, very well received by politicians and other partners. So it's great to be able to have this document with a clear list of our priorities, but also a document that's adaptable, so that we can put it in people's hands and know that they will engage with it. That's so important. And the other thing that I'd say is a document that is as mature as this couldn't come at a better time, because so much of our role at the moment is advocacy, more and more as we deal with state and federal government on lots of different issues as their funding is constrained, and as is ours. So much of the role is advocacy at the moment, well beyond what we expect from local government services. So really pleased to have this document in this way at this time. Does anyone else want to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to the mover. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to sum up? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.4 is advisory committee minutes. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council receives the attached unconfirmed meeting minutes for the following advisory committees and endorses the officer recommended actions, and that is for the Indigo Community Access Committee and Indigo. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak to the motion?
I mentioned earlier in the meeting that I've chaired the last 2 Indigo meetings. I'm sure, speaking on behalf of Indigo Community Access Committee as well, that these committees are highly valued by councillors in providing some fantastic subject matter expertise and just really highly valued.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak a second? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to sum up? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.5 is informal meeting of councillors record. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillors records. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Horn, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder? No. Any other councillors? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 15 is notices of motion and there are none. Item 16 is councillors' report. Would any councillor like to make a report to the meeting on their activities for the last month? Councillor Horn.
I recently had the privilege of representing the Shire at the 137th Rutherglen Wine Show and assisted with the presentation of 29 trophies. Rutherglen Identity, Mr. Chris Pfeiffer, come back to me, said that under the guidance of Chairman of Judges Russell Cody, a team of 12 judges and 10 associates tasted and spat more than 900 entries, very significant number. Chardonnay, sparkling wines, Prosecco and Shiraz classes, along with the Tasmanian Pinot Noir classes rated highly, as did Touriga and Tempranillo blends in the Iberian section. Not unexpectedly, it was the Durif classes that drew the most attention, described as fantastic, with some big and blocky purple wines, while others were more elegant and food-friendly. After noting that there were very few wines with faults, Mr. Cody congratulated the exhibitors and the wine industry for the massive improvement in winemaking over the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the council meeting on their activities for the last month? Councillor Landells.
Yeah, thanks. I attended 3 events I'd like to talk about. One is, well, 2 are in Stanley, so I'll start with those. Councillor Burke and I attended an event last Sunday, Jeff Craig Lecture, which was put on by the Athenaeum and held in the Stanley Hall. And the topic was about the Indigenous history and rationing and camps that went on in predominantly 19th century in areas like Tangambalanga and Barnawatha, and there was a bit about Waganya and Chiltern as well. So very, very informative. The speaker, Megan Carter, she was featured on SBS's Great Walks program, I think late last year. So that's probably online if anyone would like to check it out. And she was, it was a great learning opportunity, I thought, and very, very well attended. I guess there were about 70 or 80 people there on the day. So, really impressive event, and well done to the Stanley Athenaeum for putting on that event. A couple of weeks earlier, I attended an event that I really didn't know much about, and I want to thank Council's staff in the economic development area and also the Director of Community and Economic Development, because I know when I inquired about this, Sally Rice sent me back an email about this event, and it was about a TAFCO weather station that they'd secured funding for to assist vignerons in the area and also horticulturalists and the orchard growers. And this particular launch was out in Stanley. I think there's another one coming up in the next month or two in the Beechworth vigneron area, but it's to enable microclimate monitoring by horticulturalists. And it was really quite informative, and it was held out at Thompson's Orchards, who do cherries out at Stanley, and it was really great opportunity for me to learn about that and into great work the council's staff are doing there with communities about that work in or communities that have a bit of an ag focus. And the other one I'll just point out is Councillor Dowsley and I attended a Murray Arts Cultural Council in Albury on the 4th of September. And Murray Arts looks after 6 local government areas, 3 in New South Wales, Albury, Greater Hume and Federation Council. And in Victoria they do Tawong, Indigo and Wodonga. And I was really quite proud. It was a great opportunity to learn about all the opportunities that are occurring around the area in the arts. And I guess it really was an opportunity to think about how strong the arts has as a focus here in Indigo Shire. From little things like, you know, how it's just established that when you go through the towns, there's arts are really quite present. You know, some of the towns have artists with retail outlets and studios in the main street, and that's not uncommon. But it was a really, I felt walking away from that we look very good as far as our artistic profile goes and our creative industries through Indigo Shire. And but there's, you know, but Murray Arts are there, and we probably need to make sure that we work well with them, which I think we do at the moment. I know they're on our advisory committees for grants and different things, but yeah, just continue to work closely with them to keep maximising opportunities in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the council meeting? Councillor Burke?
Thanks, yes. Just following on from Councillor Landel's comment about the Stanley lecture that we went to. Next week is my 5th year anniversary of arriving in Kiwa, and so I've been quite interested in the history. So this lecture was all about around the whole northeast, but the particularly attention I had was regarding the Aboriginal settlements. Aboriginal settlements, settlements and reservations, and right now, which coincidentally is in and around the Tangam residential estate, and it was just fascinating just to hear the stories of that time of what it was like. So it was a very interesting lecture.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the meeting? No. I'll now go to item 16.2, which is the Mayor's Diary, which is there for information. Item 17 is the Decisions Register, again there for information. And item 18 is General Business. Do any councillors have any general business to raise at the council meeting? Councillor Shepherd?
This is probably not quite right, but I just wanted to quickly go back to 14.2 Council Professional Development Policy. I meant to thank Carla Hanlon, our Executive Manager, Police and Governance, for the great work that she's done in that space. Like, this is an important document, and I really had a note for myself to say something. And she is moving on from our council, and I just really wanted to, on probably her last report to us, say thank you for the great work she's done in keeping our staff and us all informed and governed and peopled.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. That's definitely an important note and oversight, so thank you for raising that. Councillor Horn, you also had an item of general business that you want to raise with the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask if there's an update on the Main Street of Rutherglen safety developments, please.
Acting CEO Ian Ellett.
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. I think the first bit of this is that Department of Transport tendered the works and didn't get a great outcome and have had to re-tender. Maybe I'm imagining that, but they've certainly closed tenders recently. So they're evaluating tenders at the moment. The information they gave us is that they would expect to award in October, and I'm mindful it's October tomorrow. So in the coming weeks, we would expect them to award a contract, and they would anticipate that works would commence in November. So yeah, look, obviously getting close, and as they evaluate tenders and are able to assign the work to someone, then they'll have more certainty and keep us informed.
Any other items of general business? Councillor Harvey?
I got a loud voice. Briefly, this sauna on Lake Samble, what's the status of that now? We got any update on it, or?
I'll have a go at that one through you, Madam Mayor. We as in the executive team have visited the site and had a look at the progress. It's, I believe, has now moved to its permanent location. It was tied up to the little jetty there for a while, but that was only temporary for a little bit of construction. I believe it's moved. If it hasn't, it'll be imminent, and it'll remain in that location, which is leased area.
Just another question from one of my constituents. Do we get any money from them, a lease or anything, Do we get any compensation for using the,
I'm just mindful in how we use general business, so we can probably, I would suggest that these are probably questions to take on notice, if that's okay. General business is generally used to ask for an update, which I think we've got, but otherwise for requests for briefing. So if that's okay, Councillor Harvey, great, perfect. Okay, we'll now move on to item 19, which is our confidential items. So Section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020 states that a council or delegated committee must keep a meeting open to the public unless the council or delegated committee considers it necessary to close the meeting to the public because of a circumstance specified in subsection 2 applies. The circumstances are the meeting is to consider confidential information as defined in Section 3 of the Local Government Act, or for security reasons, or it is necessary to do so to enable the meeting to proceed in an orderly manner. For note to anyone who might still be watching the meeting, I'm going to ask for a motion to move into confidential. We'll consider the items. We'll come out of confidential, but when we come out, we'll only be closing the meeting. So you can choose to stay on to watch that, or leave the meeting at this time. So I'll ask for a motion that the council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with Section 66 of the Local Government Act. Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now move into confidential. Okay, can I have a motion to move out of confidential? Moved councillor Dowsley, seconded councillor Horn. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We're back in open session now. The time is 9:54 and I'll declare the meeting closed. The next council meeting is Tuesday, the 28th of October, 2020.